well, certainly a spring in the step of a lot of Tories as they race for their trains home from Manchester after listening to Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader's keynote speech. A lot of pressure on her, big question marks about her leadership, not just among party members who are deserting her for reform, along with 20 Tory councillors yesterday alone, but also from her own shadow cabinet. But has she done and said enough today in a, well, pretty solid speech with lots and lots of policy announcements, including abolishing stamp duty for everybody? Will that be enough to woo back those Tory voters who say, now we're off to reform? Well, let's talk about this with Sir Iain Duncan Smith, former Tory leader and still a Conservative MP, of course. Good afternoon to you, Sir Iain. What did you make of her speech?
Well, I thought it answered two really important questions, which you had to do today, I think. The first was that she was able to show that she has passion and that she understands how to deliver and has a key idea, good intellect, able to do that. And the second thing was, I thought in her performance, suddenly we saw into her character for the first time, which I think people know who Starmer is, they know who Farage is.
Do they? I have no idea who Keir Starmer is.
Well, you know what I mean. They know that he doesn't know himself. But the reality is you kind of know what you're dealing with Farage the same. I think with her there's been the concern that we don't know really who she is. And I thought the speech today, a part of it was really important for her to show her character. And I thought her humour in there was really important, the occasional laugh, which probably wasn't even scripted, and the sense, really, of her link, really, with the audience. And I thought that was really important. So their performance as much as they are policy, these speeches.
Yeah, and a lot of these things do matter, and crucial policy announcements. Yeah. I would actually disagree with you. I've always felt, but then maybe, being, a political journalist, I've always felt I know the cut of her jib, I know her character, and I trusted her. She's spoken out on key issues about women's rights versus trans rights and some key issues that I really care about, and has basically, I don't, and about, cultural issues and multiculturalism and British nationalism. And she's been totally and utterly refusing to be cowed and sort of, worried about speaking out. And I've always liked that about her. But what she's been lacking is a plan, a policy. And every time we've seen a policy announcement, certainly ahead of this party conference, it's been sort of some of the reforms announced 6 months ago, and there was this fear that she was going to do this full 2 years of a little bit of contemplating, talk to a think tank, and then maybe come up with some ideas. That's been paid to by the fact that reform has just leapt ahead in the polls, continues to keep that poll lead, and the latest More in Common poll basically suggesting they could have a majority of over 90 if there were an election tomorrow. Now, lots of these people voting for them would be Tory voters. What we had today was and this week generally, was some actual meat on the bones of some policy. In particular, this big final announcement, abolishing stamp duty on homes. How important, how significant were those announcements, and particularly that one, in terms of, I suppose, shoring up support for her and the party, but also perhaps bringing back some of those reform voters?
I think it's all very important. The reason I said they don't really know who she is, you and journalists have a sense of that, but the public doesn't. And I thought today it was important for her to show that she is somebody who is more in tune with them than anybody else. The second bit in the answer to your question is I think these policy statements, I think, are solid. I mean, a lot of work at the Centre for Social Justice on the welfare changes, and all of those figures are, I promise you, absolutely right. Why? Because we did them first and they've taken them. Yeah. And I know that to be a fact. They've been checked and everything else.
And you as former Work and Pensions Secretary of the Tories, and you brought in a lot of the changes, and you actually I don't think you ever get the credit for how you were very successful at actually improving our welfare system and making it more streamlined, but also
we had the lowest number of workless households since records began. And now 1,600 people a day were going back into work.
And it's kind of the opposite right now. We've got 5,000 people a day under Labour signing on to disability benefits. She said she would tackle that, and the mobility cars and all of that. That is a key issue for the majority of voters. Want benefit cuts, don't they?
Of course it is, because it's just doesn't work. This all came out the back of COVID and everything else, but it just doesn't work if somebody looks around and says, do you know what? I'm probably better off if I don't do anything at all. Now, once that starts at an early age, you never get it back. And the most important point that I make, and I think they've made it today, is there is nothing greater in your life than that first paycheck, which tells you you did that. And now what you buy, what you do, where you go, comes down to your hard work. And I think that's the bit we often forget about. The moral purpose of work is critical. Without it, we sit on the couch and dwindle away.
Yeah, and the self-esteem. I mean,
will.
I can remember mine. The first job I had, working in a pub, doing pub lunches, and the pleasure of spending my own money that I had earned. Absolutely. In terms of the threat that's posed to her by, we talk about the shadow cabinet, even talking about getting votes together, mass resignations they were talking about apparently behind the scenes, talk of getting together these votes of letters of no confidence to the 22 committee, even ahead of what is likely expected to be, even after a good speech, next May, to be a trouncing in local Scottish and Welsh elections. Has that all been paid to by this speech and these announcements?
Well, with the Conservative Party, nothing is ever paid, as you know.
Who knows?
As a thinker,
Yes.
I know firsthand, and others do too. But I think what she has done is said to anybody out there who thinks, that somehow the one characteristic that dominated the idea in the public's mind of who we are was the idea that we're a bunch of, backstabbers and dislike each other. And if you don't like each other, then you can hardly like the public. That, I think, probably has been put to bed for a while, certainly. And I think the main thing is that, as you saw in the hall, but I also have to tell you, amongst lots of colleagues, people are saying, for God's sake, we have to show the public that not just we have a plan, but we have a leader and we're going to stick behind it and get her to the finish line. And that is a critical element. People like loyalty. They like loyalty in families. They like loyalty in business. They like people to recognize talents in others. And that's when they look at politicians, they think, you're not really like us, are you? You spend your whole time knocking each other off. Well, I think maybe we've put an end to that.
Well, you've got personal experience of this, obviously, as a former Tory party leader in opposition in the Blair years. I mean, I can certainly remember when I was a political editor, it's like, oh, it's the summer. It's supposed to be the quiet season in Parliament. No, we've got another Tory leadership contest. We've done a lot of that lately as well. We know that Robert Jenrick makes a lot of headlines. He does the videos online. He's been making a lot of headway. He might ruffle some feathers, but a lot of us would argue that he ruffles the right feathers, and he's standing up for a lot of people who feel that they've been told to shut up and put up with stuff rather than speak their minds in recent years.
That's what I would do if I was in opposition, doing it at the same time. It's exactly what he has to do. And I thought her line there was quite good, because she kind of embraced him and said, the police aren't doing that. It's down to the shadow cabinet to get people arrested for not paying their tickets, etc., on the tube and things. And I thought that was quite a good line, because it's basically saying, you're part of a team.
So very interesting. Very interesting. Do you think this will lead to a little dip up, a little boost in the polls for the Tories?
I don't know about that, because I think the public aren't as focused on politics at the moment.
Oh no, they're not watching. They're not seeing this. You've watched the full speech. We haven't had it on air. We're just running up their headlines. Most people are going to see 2 minutes at best on the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah, and it's difficult as a result. Always difficult in opposition, more difficult today because of the multi-party nature of everything at the moment. But I do think that as this sort of drips through to the public psyche, that they'll see there is an alternative. The depressive and terrible behaviour of the Labour Party at the moment in government over a year, I think this is the beginning of an answer to who they should be and who they're not. Okay. And I think it answers Reform as well, because Reform is very good on telling everybody they agree with them and they hate everything. What they're not very good at right now is telling them how we get there. And that's a big problem for them. And I know that because some of them have asked me to help them, and I keep saying to them,
I wondered...
Everything I do is published.
I wondered whether they would. Sir Ian Smith, great to talk to Conservative, former Conservative Party leader.